let us do a roll call. We are a scant group, and John is in Spain, and which is just amazing. And so we will quickly do a roll call. Charles.
Charles Phillips,
And
Housing Authority appointee.
Thank you. Tom.
Tom Kearns, Select Board appointee.
Thank you. Paul.
Paul Bohm, Recreation Commission appointee.
Thank you. And John?
John Grassley, Select Board appointee.
From Spain. And Diane Proctor, Select Board appointee. And so we go forward from there. We know that several of our members cannot be here tonight. So the very first active, so I call this to call our meeting to order. Our very first piece of business is Tom Wilson, and those of us, those representing the Right Tavern. And so let us begin. So Tom, take it away.
You're muted, Tom.
Tom, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
There we go. Thank you very much. Oh boy. So as I was saying to myself, it's a pleasure to be with you all again. And actually, I'm quite excited about this meeting because I'm going to turn it over in just a few minutes to two great people who are working with our team to really pull together the right preservation restriction. And you received a lot of documents from us, and so we're going to explain it to you, kind of outline what it is. And as you recall, the purpose of this meeting really is to review this. It's not complete, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But it's our first effort to show you what we're doing with the preservation restriction, and I'm quite confident we're going to have it all done by the end of April, and even before then. It sort of depends on a lot of things. But
could you remind the committee of when you're going to be meeting with the Historic Commission?
Right, and the Historic Commission, we're doing the same thing. We're meeting with them at a review meeting, and I believe Melissa's on the phone, and I believe it's next Tuesday, is that?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday, right. So we're going to meet with that group, very similar, depending on kind of what happens tonight in terms of the content, to review what we're doing with them. Then we meet again prior to your meeting on April 26th. I forget the date off the top of my head, but it's like the 15th or something like that of April. So we'll have two meetings with that group between, kind of sandwiched in between the meeting with you all.
Okay.
And so we'll have the benefit of everybody's inputs, and you'll have the benefit of their input as well as what we put for your decision making on the 26th.
Thank you so much, Tom. That's fantastic. Sure. Okay.
So the two people who I'm going to basically turn this over to is first person is Nadia McCorthy. She is a partner in the firm of I think it was Dear McCorthy. Anyway,
Professor Dresser.
Thank you, Dresser. Yes, thank you. I've been driving for the last day for like 7 hours. So I'm in Philadelphia actually right now. So I'm a little brain dead, but anyway, Nadia is an attorney that specializes in preservation restrictions, and we've given her lots of examples. She has a lot of work her own, and she's the artist behind the drafting of the document itself, the legal document, and will also shepherd it once we get y'all's approval and we're getting agreement on what it is, through the state and as well as to the town's regulatory reviews and things of that nature. So she's a great person to work with and a great resource. Also with us is Lynn Spencer of Spencer Preservation Group. I think I've mentioned this to Diane, but I think it might get to you. We have selected a Spencer Preservation Group to basically be our project lead on this whole effort, from the beginning to the end through this whole process. They have a deep experience in working with preservations, with the Secretary of Interiors, with preservation restrictions, a lot of great experience. Some of you all know her, and she's becoming a real partner with us as we work through the initial phase, which is to understand what is historic in this building, what's important for us to preserve as we begin thinking about the design and programmatic parts of this as well. And so Lynn will pick up some answers, and one of her associates has developed the photographs, and she'll talk you through where we are at that point. So that's the cast. And I will then step aside if there's unless there's any kind of questions from the group before I turn it over to Nadia.
No, fine. This is fantastic. Thank you, Tom.
Good. Nadia, it's all yours.
Okay, so I hopefully folks obviously would have gotten these documents in advance and you would have seen the draft historic preservation restriction. For anyone who's seen these before, this is a pretty standard document. This is the language is pretty much the template that we've used with Mass Historical Commission over a long time, at least a decade. And this particular document is tailored to this matter in that we're looking at, I believe when this came to me, it started with just exterior and the interior restrictions have been added in. So the idea is that we're going to protect not just the exterior of this building, but a significant part of the interior, because that's really where the history is. And I think Lynn will talk about that. I didn't know sort of if folks needed me to walk through the document. I'm not quite sure. I suspect you have a level of familiarity with this kind of a document. And I didn't know if you wanted me to walk through the particular sort of, the meat of the document, as I would call it, which, would be, you'd find it really in section 2 and 3 is really this most significant sections of this document. But if you want me to walk through the document, I can, and I'll kind of listen to you folks, because I don't want to sort of walk you through something that you're pretty familiar with either.
Let me ask the committee what their pleasure is. Paul and Tom and Charles and John, what is your sense? I think we could go to the heart of the document, would be my sensibility, but what do other people think? Paul?
Yeah, I was going to say the heart of the document, or what you see as the most important sections of anybody who's going to review this document. What are the key elements?
So if you're looking at, if you have the document in front of you, even if you don't, but if you're looking at section 2, that is the part that talks.
Would you be willing to do, there you go, a screen share. Thank you.
Sure, that's great. So if you go to section 2, which is on page 3, so right there, so there is sort of like the beginning of the meat of the document in terms of we're saying what is the owner, which is the First Parish in Concord, what are they taken on here? And they've taken on an obligation to protect the exterior of the building, but also these designated parts of the interior. And I'll let Lynn talk about that. So that is, the preservation restrictions can go both ways, but that's a significant level of protection, really sort of the highest level of protection that you can have in one of these preservation restrictions, and that is here. And this talks about sort of that obligation to maintain that, and also an anticipation that there's going to be a restoration effort, which is part of the plan here. So that's in here. Your guidelines are going to be a few things. They're going to be the Secretary of State's standards. They're going to be the Historic District Commission guidelines, and there's also a set of restriction guidelines attached here as Exhibit E, which I always feel like makes it kind of easy for you to get a sense of what's going to be allowed without the property owners coming in and checking in with you and saying, we really need to do this sort of minor repair, and that they don't have to check in with you with the vis-a-vis the items that are listed as minor modifications. But if it's listed as a major modifications, just those are examples, by the way. That is not a comprehensive list, but it's meant to give you a sort of a set of examples of what might be considered minor. It does not require the parish coming to you and saying, can we have permission to do this? And then the major modifications would be of the type that they would have to come to you and say, yes, we're going to do this. This is our plan. Are you okay with it?
If you could forward the document for us so that we could see the specifics to which you were just referring, it would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. So this is 2.1, but I did jump over to Exhibit E, which is, I think, its own document. So why don't we stay on this? And I think it's easier to stay on this for just a few minutes. I won't spend a really long time on it, but if you go to section 3.1 on the next page, page 4, you're going to see the section that talks about approval. It says without prior written consent, if you can see that, there are things that the grantor, which is the parish, can't change the exterior or the designated parts of the interior. of the building without seeking approval. And again, this is subject to, if you'll see later on, you see underlined that word minor, except for minor modifications. But essentially, they've got to come, make a presentation if they're making a major modification, present that to the town vis-a-vis the, through the historical commission, present what they're going to do with timeline for that work. And then the town has to either accept, and you're going to go to the next page 5, section 3.3, and that talks about the review process. Oh, maybe this, I might have jumped. So there we go. So 3.3 talks about how the process works. There's just a submission. The town or the historical commission will have 45 days to get back to the parish about whether they approve it or not. And then if they don't approve it, typically what you do is you come back and you say, this is really what we think you should do, or why don't you try this, or we would be okay with this. So there's typically a back and forth in that process when there is a major modification. So think of one that's sort of easy to envision is like a roof replacement or a window replacement, something like that. That's something that would likely come to you for approval.
And one quick question, or one quick point. Diane, that statement about talks about major or minors was included in one of the documents. I forget which exhibit it is. Off the top of my head.
So I figure we can go to that if you would like.
I've got it, Tom. I just wondered if it would be helpful to see it as she was talking about it.
Oh, I see. Okay, great.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
have it. We'll jump to it in a minute. I just wanted, there's not much more I will, a few other points I want to make. I don't want to keep you, I know you've got limited time. The other part here is section 5. So if you go down a little bit, I think it's the next page. I think our pagination is different, but there you go, public access. The idea is that the public will have access to that main floor during your regular operating hours. So when it's open, the public will be able to go into the first floor. And I think presently at this moment, the idea is that the other floors of the building would be used for either administrative offices, storage, and other uses at this point. And then.
Thank you so much, Nadia. If I could just stop you for just a moment.
Sure.
In the conversations that in our presentation to the FinCom last week, there were questions about the use of the building for the public. And so this becomes a very important issue. And the emphasis here that you demonstrate is that the main floor of the building will be open. I think the more detail we can have, and Tom knows this, the more detail we can have about how the upper floors will be used in terms of responding to the public, I think the more helpful it will be. If it can be seen as a kind of whole cloth building, one that isn't renting out parts of it or doing something else, but being used to support the entirety of the building in its public purposes, I suspect there will be more enthusiasm from the litmus papers I've dropped down in various presentations. So I hope that makes, I don't know if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I'll let Tom address that later and we can talk about it later. I have literally sort of given you the meat, I think, just because we've got limited time, and I think it's important for Lynn to speak because, she and her team have done a phenomenal job with sort of what they've outlined and what they've cataloged. But I do want to go to Exhibit E, if you can jump to that. I think that was a separate document. And just to give you an idea, so these are the restriction guidelines. And again, these are not, exclusive. But so if you can see sort of the idea of when you're looking at paint, if you're scraping it and you're using the same color and it's a non-decorative surface, then they're not going to have to, the parish doesn't have to check in with you if they're doing that. But if they're going to fully strip an area or it's a decorative surface, ornamental, they will have to make a presentation to the town for approval to do that kind of work before they do that work. And, so on, sort of like regular maintenance of the windows, recaulking them, fine, replacing the windows. The parish is going to have to seek permission before they can do that. And so you can run down the different go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this was an extremely helpful list, Nadia. Keep going. I mean, at least I found it quite illuminating.
I feel like it is incredibly helpful because it starts to make this something that is tangible. You can kind of see that these are things that are likely to happen and what are the things that we might, that we're comfortable saying, yeah, they don't have to check with us. Again, the interior walls, that to me has always seemed important, like fully reversible changes, you know, fine. But when you're creating new openings, something permanent, then the parish is going to have to come to you and say, this is our plan. What do you think? Are you okay with that? Any demolition is going to require approval. I'm just trying to think if we can go down a little further.
One other, just a point, our plans are, by the way, is at this point in time, we're doing the assessment, we're laying out the preservation restriction, all that, and all the points that Nadia is talking about. Ultimately, we're going to have a plan for what we're going to do with the first floor, second floor, third floor, and the basement. And we're going to sit down and come back to you all and say, all right, now we're operating under the PR. We understand that. And here is now the design and the programmatic use of the building. Here's how we are going to see about doing that. I'm thinking that's going to occur probably in the sort of May to June timeframe, just in terms of what we're doing. And that's really what Lynn is charged with as well, in addition to documenting what's there. So her phase two, if you will, or phase two is really looking at the design. And then we'll come back to you. And this is when I think this kind of a document will be really helpful as guidelines for us in terms of what we really need to argue about or whatever, discuss, and what things you go, yeah, that sounds great, or whatever, you know. And so I just want to be clear that that we will be coming back to you as an agreement that we've had with you for this all the funding is to do that. We'd want to do that anyway. It's kind of part of our charter.
Thank you so much. And I think you were really exquisite about suggesting that as you plan the use of the Right Tavern in its entirety, that public input, which is the other thing
Right.
that I keep hearing wherever
Right.
I went,
Yeah.
in terms of formal presentation, is very important. And you're obviously planning that and thinking about how to do that in a sensible way, not in a defining way, but in a sensible way to help imagine how this all can be used. So thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So this document is sort of, I'll call it the ongoing document, managing the project changes and the requirements. Tom, what you just said, sort of the presentation of the initial plan, is that codified in the preservation restriction? Because that's sort of the starting gun for this project.
It's a great question. The preservation restriction is first. Well, first of all, is the assessment inventory of what is historic. That's what Lynn has done and is doing. The second part of it is the restriction of all of those things that are in fact historic. So all that needs to be down as almost as a foundation. Then with that knowledge, now we can talk about design and how we want to use the building and things like that. And then we'll come back to you all and say, hey, this is how we're going to use room 101, 102. Here's what we see as the flow. Here's the front door. Here's how it's going to work. And on the second floor, here's what we are going to see there, and what the third floor is going to be used for, et cetera. So it goes in a flow. But I think the foundation element is what we're talking about tonight.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may, I think this is a good point to segue to Lynn to talk about the work that she's done, if that sounds appropriate, or if folks have questions for me right now, I can certainly take them.
Thank you. I'd love to hear Charles's question first. And Nadia, thank you so much. Charles, go ahead.
You're welcome.
Yeah, yes. All I wanted to ask was, you say that major changes come back for approval. The town, let's see, town of Concord is holding the preservation restriction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And would the agency be the historical commission?
Mm-hmm.
It would, yeah.
That would do that. That would give the approval. Yeah.
Yes, typically that's who administers these.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you, Charles. And Tom?
Thanks, Diane. If this is the moment to talk about the PR, I think I just had a couple of comments, and I'll be brief. The things that I was looking for, I think, are here, and I think Tom and the whole team, I think you've done a great job. It's very exciting. So love to see it. The evolution has been, first of all, that we have the exterior and designated parts of the interior. That was the thing that we had been discussing, and it's here and it's very clear. I'm very pleased to see that designating the parts of the interior is Lynn Spencer, and her reputation precedes her. Lynn, thank you. So we're in good hands there. So I think that really ties that off very, very nicely. The submission of the PR, I did have a question. Maybe it's for Nadia, and I may not have read it quick as thoroughly as I should have. But is there a tie to the commencement of work, that it must go through and be approved prior to the commencing of work? Or what is the relationship, maybe is the better question, between work proceeding and the PR?
I mean, typically there's no tie in terms of if the PR is not in place, then work can be done, but I'm not going to speak for Tom, but I don't think that's the intention. Am I correct? I think the intention is to get the PR in place and then commence work so that the work is subject to the PR. Am I correct?
Mhm. That's right.
Okay.
So I think that's what we discussed, and you're continuing to proceed on that basis.
That's right. That's right.
And and Nadia, is that reflected in the document?
It's not. I guess it doesn't matter in the sense that until the document's in place, nobody signed it, right? When the document is signed, we will have the preservation restriction, so we'll have the agreement. Until it's in place, there's really no restriction on what can be done, at least to the interior. I think there is actually an historic district, so there are exterior restrictions at this point. But again, my understanding is there's no intention to, make any alterations at this point. The idea is to get this in place, have the input of Lynn and her group, and, to sort of work in tandem with this, the idea that this is going to be in place. But if you wanted to do something like that, it would be a wholly separate agreement. So I'm not sure that that's needed here, understanding the intent of the parties at least.
Yeah, and I bring it up. I don't know. I don't have a recommendation on how to resolve it, but I think we had discussed this to try to ensure that this was in place, so the terms of the PR could help guide the process with the actual work. And so maybe that that could be evaluated. You could make a recommendation there. I also wanted to make one other just clarification: public access to the main floor, but that has no relationship to the parts of the building that'll be preserved, which will be comprehensive.
I'm not sure.
Comprehensive as appropriate, meaning if there's something important in the attic that we find historically important, even though we're not planning on having public access to that zone, it will be preserved.
And I believe that's the case. I'm not entirely sure, but I think the other factor that went into that decision is accessibility. Typically in older buildings, making the other floors accessible is very difficult.
We understand that.
No debate. No, I have no debate about access, but that does not set the scope of preservation. Preservation will be as appropriate throughout the building.
The preservation will be for the whole document, for the whole building. Tom, to your point, it'll be for the whole building.
As Lynn determines.
Yes.
I think it's time for me to jump in. I'm raising both my hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lynn.
So my last comment on the PR, then I'll be done, was on the Exhibit E, majors and minors. There is some determination there, a recommendation around when something is brought before the town or not. I think as per the HDC requirements, and then Peter's here and could help illuminate that notion, but I think it also has to, whether it's a major or minor, it has to be coordinated with what HDC expectations are.
And Melissa is here, I believe.
Thank you.
So that's helpful.
Well, I'm thinking, yes, certainly historical commission, but I think the Historic Districts Commission as well.
Right. That's also right. You're
Yeah.
exactly right, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Lynn, take it away.
I want to thank everyone for allowing us to come to visit you tonight. I must say I'd love to be there in person, but this is almost as good because we get to share screens and share information and share ideas. My involvement with the Wright Tavern has been pretty recent. And so I will say that with Tom's encouragement and Peter Noble's encouragement, our team has gotten started on what we feel is the beginning of the overall project that we are involved with, and that is the assessment of what we call character defining features, the things that make this building historically significant, that are important to preserve. And the effort that you've seen on what was provided yesterday with Exhibit C is the beginning, is what we're offering as the example of what we're going to be doing throughout the building. So fortunately, I was joined on this by Larry Sorley, who I believe is here today. Larry has been an advisor to the Wright Tavern Trust for the past few months. He's been a strong advocate for the protection and preservation of elements of this building. And he was a terrific guide with Doug Manley, my partner, and Bill Finch, whose work you see on the graphic. So what we asked Bill Finch to do as our materials analysis person was to begin to sort of catalog the important parts of this building. He had the benefit, as we did, of the report that was done by the historic structures report that was done by Ground Root in 2014. You know, the difference between what you have in the Ground Root report and the graphic, photographic.
Lynn, may I just ask you, is there a slide you'd like us to be looking at?
Oh,
while
I'm
you-
sorry. I was thinking that, see, I'm looking at on my screen, but
I thought you might see, but I was.
yeah, if you would go to Exhibit C.
Do you want Exhibit C or the attachment, Lynn? It
No,
might
I
be
want-
the attachment.
I guess I would start with the Exhibit C and then go to the attachment.
Well, it's actually,
Yeah, okay. So what you're seeing there is a distillation in words of what we've observed in the physical fabric of the building. And there's a balance that needs to be achieved here between, you know, what we observe and what we're protecting, and at kind of a hierarchy associated with it. As Tom Kearns just mentioned, you know, he would, and the committee has said, you'd like to see the entire building cataloged in this way. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm showing you the example of what we've got so far. Next on the screen, I'd like to show you how we got there. And with that, if you could go to the attachment. Yes. So I was mentioning Ground Root had done an excellent job of looking at physical fabric, you know, 7 years ago. I believe that was funded with some community preservation funding, which was great. This analysis begins to put it in a pictorial way. And these photographs will, as part of the preservation restriction, be annotated with the specific indications of what needs to be protected in each room. So I'll take that list that was derived in part from this analysis and then basically catalog that on the photographs. And that will also be tied to floor plans. Now, why are we doing it this way? Well, years ago, I cut my teeth while at the Society for the Preservation of New England Antiquities on the early, what has become the easement program, but it used to be called the stewardship program. And so we had developed a methodology of assessing a historic building and then basically identifying what needs to be protected. And you really need to be able to do it in a way that a reviewer 10 years from now can interpret and find and locate the elements that need to be protected. So there'll be parts to this. One is the listing, if you will, room by room, in the way that I'm suggesting under Exhibit C. It will then be cued to photographs that would become part of the preservation restriction, and then keyed to floor plans, so you can follow it throughout the building. Bill's analysis.
Like the slide to be moving forward, Lynn, or do you want to keep it? I don't know if you can see what we're seeing, but.
Yeah, no, if you would just want to flip to other slides. You know, a good example is in fact room 101, which is also seen at the, you can see it Q planned tied to the location sheet at the bottom of the page. I guess you can't really see that, but you can locate it on the floor plans. And so we're identifying the architectural features such as the woodwork, the hardware, the framing elements. In this case, you can see the girts and summer beam called out. So it becomes quite an explicit record of what is there and what needs to be protected. I will say that I've suggested to Tom that it would be good to have the furnishings the office furnishings that are still in the space removed so we can actually have a clear view of each wall. For instance, in the room that you're just looking at, room 102, which is to the southeast room, you're seeing an example of a federal period mantle. This building is an evolved building. It has elements of the 18th century, but it has elements of the 19th century as well. And those reflect, if you will, the evolution of changing tastes and needs by the occupants of the building. We think those are important to protect. Most of all, though, it's important to protect things that sometimes are hidden. And the summer beams, which are encased in wood casings, or the girts and plates, also need to be protected. And in fact, they hold the building up. So that's very, very, very practical. And some of this is just very practical kind of stuff. In some rooms, for instance, you'll see on my notes that we reference historic floorboards that are underneath modern flooring. We're not protecting the modern flooring, but we want to protect the historic floorboards that are underneath. Mm-hmm. We think that we can do the Wright Tavern Trust has ambitions for interpretive programs, for public engagement, for sharing this resource with a wider community. We think we can do that in a way that respects the historic fabric while safeguarding it and having people, in fact, be able to enjoy what is important about this building, which is an authentic historic experience. So I won't say much more. You can see that this is the kind of baseline work that we work with as we are identifying the elements that go into the preservation restriction. How many of you have enjoyed the sunroom? That's what you're seeing at the Knotty Pine sunroom which is part of the 1920s.
I think, I thought the exit sign was particularly 19th century. No,
I know. So what we see here is that modifications, some significant modifications have been made basically in the mid to late 20th century. So in some cases, for instance, in a passage that was created cutting into a room to get to another room, we're not protecting the 20th century intervention or the recent intervention. We're suggesting that, it's possible that it could be returned to its original configuration if desired. But somebody using this preservation restriction is actually going to need to, as I said, be able to use the list, the photographs, and the floor plans to sort of navigate their way around the building.
Thank you so much. You will see if you can, in my background here on my picture, I'm sitting in a 1790s house in New Hampshire, and you will see some windows in the background that were part of that original house. That's not where they sat originally.
Well, one of the things that I actually loved about this discovery process is understanding in one room, in room 102, what looks to be a wall is actually the backside of a door, and the door facing the sun set room or whatever, the sunroom, as actually a historic door. So
Right.
there are things that are sort of hidden in layers.
It's so interesting, isn't it? And it is a question of layers, isn't it? Let me
Yeah.
turn first to our committee with questions. Thank you for the thoroughness of this presentation and the thoughtfulness. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. This is just so fascinating how you do your work. What is your, given this structure and the renovations over time, do you expect much to be hidden that you haven't yet found? And if so, what's the process of the continual discovery as the work is actually done?
You know what, when you have a chance, all of you, turn to sheet 6, room 103, and you'll see some of the paint scrapings that Bill has done in order to use it as a dating tool to compare woodwork by paint layers. Oops, there we go. One of the things that might be hidden, in fact, is what we discover about original finishes. And some of that we do with paint analysis. Some of it, at times, we found scraps of wallpaper, hidden under later moldings that have been applied. So while we now encounter a space that is a very white painted environment, that is not the space that was known and lived in by people in the 18th and 19th centuries and into the early 20th centuries. In fact, the early 20th century postcards of this space were filled with vibrant wallpapers and bright colors and that sort of thing. That's what we see during the time when it was an inn. So we will undoubtedly discover more about historic finishes. We will learn more because, Bill Finch and our team have had about 2 weeks on this project. We'll learn more as we actually delve into the second floor and the attic. The third floor and the attic, to me, are really fascinating spaces. To me, the attic or the third floor is just kind of rich. Because it hasn't been renovated. It's pretty much the way it evolved over the 19th century, quite honestly, when it was used for sleeping rooms and some storage. We'll learn more.
It's fantastic what you're discovering. Must be exciting.
Well, it is.
Yeah. Are there other questions from the committee? Seeing none, do we have any questions from the public that has joined us? And Peter Nobley, it's great to have you. And Shelley, thank you. And Larry, nice to have you here. I can't see you, but I'm glad. And Melissa and Linda, and 2 Lindas, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the public, from the observers? Larry, do you have something you'd like to add? You're muted, Larry, so.
Okay, I think Lynn is doing a great job, and I hope to be involved, continuous throughout the project, and it's going to be fun and also very revealing what we find.
It's always just it's like going on a mystery tour, isn't it?
Exactly.
It is a great adventure. Okay, thank you so much. So just to summarize, Tom, your presumption is the PR, the preservation restriction document, will be ready before the town meeting.
Oh, definitely. And in fact, I think the legal document that Nadia laid out is I would love to get you any kind of guidance, feedback, questions you all have, or clarification points on that piece. Then we'll have an exhibit, and the exhibit will be a lot of the work that Lynn did, which is that list of what are the elements that we want to include in that's going to be preserved. And so that will be put as an exhibit rather than in the body, but it'll make a reference in the body to exhibit whatever A, B, C, whatever it is. And what we want to have is that done for the entire building, ready for your final approval on the 26th of April, which is that meeting. It's a little close to the town meeting, so hopefully we're all in agreement before we go into the meeting. But and we'll try to get that to you as soon as we can. But without any further guidance, we think that there's the legal document itself which I think is pretty good. And the key thing is going to be what are those pieces that that are going to be included in the exhibits.
One of the things I would recommend, given the public hearings in which, you know, I've been discussing the CPC recommendations, is that you have a concise but helpful document ready on the table at town meeting.
Okay.
To pick up, collect, and look at, so that, you know, were questions to be asked, it could be referred to, it could be
That's
mentioned,
good.
and it would inform folks, as
That's
well as a sensibility. And I've also picked this up about, you know, kind of how the building is going to be used. You
Right.
can't say that absolutely at this point, but you can certainly speak to it in terms of, if nothing else, the first floor.
Right.
And in general, the way in which the First Parish has supported these endeavors. So the combination of public use and parish support,
Right.
I think will go a long way to mitigate at least a great deal of the concerns I've heard as I've presented this.
Well, I attended the finance committee meeting, and I really enjoyed the comments that people made, and we've taken those to heart. I passed the word to our team, to Lynn, to Ladia, everything sort of what people expressed as concerns. And Dan, I think your idea of putting together a document for the town meeting that kind of outlines what we're doing was an excellent idea. One of the things you'll at the end of this week or maybe early next week, remember that the magazine Discover Concord.
See, I can't find it. I don't get that magazine, so I've tried to find a copy, but I could not find one, Tom. So
well, it's not out yet. It's being released. It's being released at the either. That's why.
Okay. That's why I couldn't find it. Okay.
Exactly. So their spring issue, and we're one of the featured articles, and it kind of explains a little bit of the history of the building and a bit about what we're doing. So it's, you know, it's even more of a communication to the community. And you know, we will hopefully get put in these meetings, getting input. We are planning some more general meetings, if you will, for the congregation. I mean, not for the community. And so we want lots of input to provide guidance to what we're doing. But you know, to some extent, it's really going to be a lot of work that Lynn and her team are going to do, and pulling this puzzle together in a way that is going to be something that the town can really be proud of.
Well, I'm sure that's true. And I think the key is to give as much information to citizens as we can. I think there is in the town right now anxiety about taxes, anxiety about how tax money is being used, about tax money being used for public good. And because that's, you know, at a kind of, you know, very high rate right now, I think anything you can do and we can do, but particularly you can do to address that is going to be very helpful.
That's great. Well, it's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the hard work on this, and thank you, you know, Lynn, for all that you're doing on this, and Nadia, thank you so much. And let me just make sure that there are not further questions. Tom Kearns, you have no question you would like addressed?
No, thank you. I think I got mine all out there. Appreciate it.
Okay, and anyone else? I mean, John, it's now 1 o'clock in the morning or 12:30 in the morning for San Sebastian, Spain. So, I mean, he's just being brilliant. Okay, Charles, any question you have?
No, it's okay.
Okay, all right. Paul, you're all set? Okay, thank you all very much.
All right.
You.
Thank you all.
Have a lovely evening, and thank you.
Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
So Diane?
Yes. Hi, John, go.
Yeah, my question is whether my vote is needed going forward. I don't know what else you have planned.
Well, John, we're going to look at the kind of the politics of the upcoming meeting, but since you need to go to bed, we won't vote, I think, tonight. And given the lack of a kind of a quorum once you say goodnight, we won't vote on conditions that we need to put on various proposals. I will, however, share with the committee what I've heard and concerns that people have, so that we can think about that as we go forward in terms of our presentation. So John, no, we don't need your vote. Your presence for this discussion was particularly important. Tuck in, enjoy your trip, give Holly a hug, and good night.
Okay, I just want to be sure. I will check with Heather if she thought were there any votes that were needed.
Except for the minutes, which we can wait till the next minute.
Yeah, we can wait on minutes. And we don't need to vote to approve anything at tonight's meeting. So
Okay, all right.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
I don't know how to say in Spanish, bon voyage, or I can do it.
Adios.
Adios.
Buonanotte.
Okay. I thought I would kind of share with you some of the things I've heard. How many of you were able to watch the FinCom meeting? Okay, well then let me just quickly, let me quickly share with you some of the things I heard, because they're going to be important to our successful presentation of the CPC recommendations as we go forward. The old man's exterior preservation, there were questions asked about how much money the trustees of the reservations were putting into this, why we were taking care of the exterior of the building, the whole set of painting questions that we asked and that emerged, vis-a-vis legal questions came up again. I think Heather worked beautifully with our legal counsel to assure that we could go forward on this one, but it did reemerge as a question. And so I think I'm writing, with your permission, I'm going to write, and Heather's permission, we'll write to the trustees of the preservations and ask them for the percentage of money or what they're putting into the preservation of this building, so that we can balance what we're doing, which is actually a rather modest amount, $38,500, in comparison to what they're putting in to the restoration and securing of this building. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, Diane, I forget, was that not in their application?
It may well be in their application, Paul. I have it right here, but I think we went back to them for various questions. So hold on just a minute.
yeah, they're contributing $14,527.
Right. So, I mean, they are contributing, and I think what I'd like to hear from them, because it's not just that. Trustees of reservations have contributed, I think, a great deal more than just that. to this particular house and project and everything.
It also states in their application that, you know, they've leveraged staff time and funding from the organization's budget to complete the necessary work as well. Preparation of the project management, that sort of thing is all being done in-house by staff. So they're also contributing that way.
So I think the more specific they can be about that, and therefore we can be in a very brief and succinct presentation of that item, the more persuasive it will be. I was quite interested in the amount of pushback that we got at the FinCom meeting. I wish Burton were here because I think he observed it. And you know, it was, and Heather was there as well. And you know, it was a pretty, it was a very, I mean, very supportive and very decent. I'm not suggesting that anybody was out to get us in any way, but there were a lot of very serious questions asked. And I think it reflects, as I suggested earlier, just the general pressures people are feeling right now about taxes in town.
So Diane, was it the sense that the trustees were not contributing enough, or what was the tone of the?
Just kind of, why are they even asking for money for what looked like routine maintenance? And I said, it didn't seem to me like routine maintenance. You know, when birds have lodged in the eaves of the building, and when whole literally physical structures are in peril, this is not just routine painting. You know, this is really protection of the structure of that building. And, you know, we all noticed, Paul, that the fact that they're going to have to cut back the bushes, they're going to have to redo all sorts of things about the way that building is being treated right now in order to preserve its exterior. And its exterior is in peril, I think.
Yeah. You know, I think, Heather, if they can monetize some of those things you just talked about, staff time and other things, that might be helpful, because that's real, and it's money coming from somewhere. It's not necessarily in the application as monetized. So,
Yeah,
it's a suggestion if we need more.
yeah, I think that's really important. And you'll keep hearing this refrain as we move our way through.
I would say, Diane, Old Manse and Old Manse and Wright Tavern, for me, have maybe equal significance historically, and both are non-town owned.
That's exactly
And
right, Tom. And
mhm,
and yet both are in terms of the impact they have historically in our town, they're significant.
absolutely. So very significant non-town, and we're, obviously making very, very large investments in Wright Tavern, and rather modest in Old Manse. Would seem.
That's exactly right, Tom.
Yeah.
And I would add something else, Tom, and that is that Tom Wilson, in a note that he sent to me, says they're not coming back for more money from CPC. There's not going to be a phase 4 or 5. This is it. They're going to, I think they have a lot of confidence in their
Mhm.
capacity to raise money privately now going forward. So, I mean, I think this is the last of the Wright Tavern requests that we'll see, which is a
Yeah,
really,
mhm. I think also the Old Manse team put together an excellent application.
I agree.
They really did. I think we've coached the Wright Tavern folks along, and they're getting there. They really are, which is nice. But Old Manse, right from the beginning, were in control of their content in a very nice way, I thought.
I thought so too, but you
Yeah.
will remember, Tom, that our lawyer said, whether we questioned whether we could in fact do this in terms of painting. Do you remember?
I do, and it was a question that we had for ourselves right at the beginning. Was this routine maintenance or was this extraordinary?
Yeah,
And
and
I think
I think we all felt it was extraordinary and not routine, and I addressed that at our public meeting. I mean, I think
Right.
I hope I spoke, Heather's help me out. I think I spoke well to each of these issues, but I think it's important to share
I'm
with
sure.
where we got pushback so that we can, in our MOUs, our memorandums of understanding, as we go forward, make sure that we emphasize certain things. Right, Tavern, the big issue was public use. Fine, you put a lot of money into this. What is it going to mean to the public? Is the public going to be able to use it? The public hasn't been allowed in there for years. They're going to be allowed in there now. So that question is being addressed. And again, I hope you heard me tonight emphasize the importance of that, in what they discuss, and how much of this, has the parish put forward. Now, one of the ironies of all this is that in talking with Tom and Peter, I think noticed this at all. And Tom, I think you know this as well as I do, that they actually have been barely cutting even on that property, renting it, just in terms of regular maintenance. So it's not like they've been making a lot of money, I don't believe. And Tom certainly gave me that impression. They haven't made a lot of money on the rentals in that building.
Yeah, I have no context for that, but yeah,
Well,
I'm not surprised.
I think they've been holding even, but I don't think it's been a particularly money-making.
No.
I don't think it's helped to offset the cost of the pews in the church. Now in the public library, I'm going to urge Anka to be a little more specific. This is item E for us, the Concord-Free Public Library. I've written to Anka and asked her to tell me ask her to be a little bit more specific about how the library has already supported many of those archival refreshments, kind of revivals and historic preservation already, and that she's just asking for some more money to move that project forward. Now, the Assabet River Bluff, not that we haven't spent enough hours on the Assabet River Bluff preservation, but the pushback we got was 5 affordable houses on all that land. What are you thinking about? Why couldn't we have 10 affordable houses on that land? Affordable housing is what we need most in this town. And you're telling me that somehow percentages of this are going to recreation and the other, and public use, and the other, a small part of it is going just to affordable housing. So advice, on how to, I mean, we got that coming and going. So advice and conversation about how to present this one. I would very much appreciate.
Well,
Yes, it's Charles.
yeah. Well, I mean, one factor is that what we really didn't take into account earlier is the terrain and the topology of the space.
Right.
This is an attempt. What was decided is an attempt to actually do a what I think the town should always think is a proper use of the space for affordable housing or for any housing, because of the fact that that we want that certain buffer from the river 200 feet back. That's now recommended because of the river, wild and scenic river. And then you had a kind of a occasional stream that runs right up into the property,
Right.
which I noticed. I noticed when I walked over there, a kind of declivity, and the idea was to stay away from that so you wouldn't have flooding. So it ends up being not nearly as much space as you might have thought initially.
Okay.
And also the fact is that the committee, the appropriate housing, affordable housing appropriate trust, simply did not want to contribute the money that we asked them to contribute for housing.
Right.
So that was kind of killed
Diane,
the larger project too.
Yeah, I thank you, Charles. That's wonderful. I'm just sharing again with you. I mean, I did respond, but I'm just sharing with you what kind of pushback I got. Paul.
who made these was this from the committee or from the public or from both?
No, this was from FinCom, and it was
Okay, it's from the committee.
It was also from the select board, Paul, because the select board was also present. So FinCom and select board members.
So just reaction to this, the history of this project has been such an effort in balancing stakeholder interests and stakeholder demands, if you will. You know, I could see if there was too much housing, there'd be an uproar about from the open space. Why isn't there more open space? So it's been a balancing act from the beginning, and this project is, has had so much community involvement from so many stakeholders. I think the answer here, Diane, is this is the CPC and Marcia and others have struck a very usable balance and build consensus around it, and that's sort of where we ended up. But if you swing too much housing, the open space people are going to yell. So I mean, this is we've struck collectively in the town a balance here, I think, and I don't know if that's the answer, but that's the reality.
Oh, Paul, that's gorgeous. I also, and again, one listens carefully in these meetings. And one of the things I don't believe I went back and said, but I probably should have, is that to get 5 affordable houses without any other housing. In other words, so that a developer does not come in and need to build 2 or 3 rather larger houses in order to then build affordable housing. We actually we're actually, and Keith Bergman has persuaded me that we can get at least 3 affordable housing, new units on that property, plus the 2 that are already there, refurbished and going forward. So actually that it's kind of a bargain, to get 5 affordable houses without having to sacrifice that public property for something, for bigger houses in that space.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the other balance, the balance between the town acquiring a useful asset and the town not having any say at all for private ownership. That's the other balance.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Paul.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree with Paul. I thought you said it just right. A balance has been struck, and I think I totally agree with that.
good. Okay. Well, I just want you to know what I heard. Okay.
It's good. Thank you.
The town of Concord Village open space. Now you remember this is this is the Junction Village open space. Now I got a lot of pushback on that one, because people said, a park, wait, we've already got a park, Giroux Land. Giroux Park is right across from there. We spent a fortune on that. Why do we need another park? You know, how many parks do we need in town? You know, this is a lot of money on parkland. You know, is this really worth spending that kind of money? And then there was the question of how much more money were they going to come back for? Because it says right in the proposal that this was the first stage in the series. So I said, there was a lot of discussion that night about the need to get rid of invasive species. And so we were able to bring up the fact that, you know, there's a lot of invasive species there. What I didn't mention that night, and again, as I said, I felt that my role was as much listening as you know, in any way defending. But I can remember when the Junction Village project was presented, there was the understanding in our town that we would, in fact, make the property around Junction Village usable for the citizens who are living there. And right now, it isn't. It's essentially a jungle and a mess. And that's partly what this effort would be doing. But there were some strong voices against more park land and more and why were we spending money on that? So we may hear that at the town meeting and just, you know, be aware of that. I would love to hear your conversations or your thoughts about that.
Is there a difference between sort of open space for passive recreation and parkland, or they're very much the same thing? Is somebody objecting to the park designation as opposed to just open space for the use of the citizens?
No, that's a good question, Paul. My sense was, and Linda Escobedo was there. So Linda, if you could help me, you know, step in and help on Linda Miller. I don't know if you were there, but you know, I spoke up and said that I thought the West Village, you know, that the West Village team had really done very thoughtful work on this. And we're talking about making this a property that has some significance in town. You know, where the Civil War group first kind of mustered and moved forward. Of course, it's right near the prison as well. And so therefore, giving it a kind of an identity, a space, I think is important. I should say, I know you all know this, but there is still a lot of rancor in town about the amount of money we spent on the Giroux property, you know, a kind of to what end. And so this just seems across the street from Giroux, and what have we got? You know, so Linda, what is your sense? How can you advise us?
I think you've captured a lot of the sentiment. I think the other thing that was, you might have even pointed out that evening, is an opportunity for families of the residents to have a place to enjoy with their family members who are living there. And also that the town had not previously necessarily given recognition to the many people's lives who have been touched by the prison.
That's right.
Yeah, so.
And this is a way to recognize that. This is a way to honor that, and then a way to move forward. So we can't, in many ways, we can't rectify what has happened in the past, but we can move forward in a purposeful and thoughtful way. So in any case, another heads up.
Well, yeah, I would just say in any way that this investment is connected to others that are proximate. So there can be a greater public kind of access and use, and, you know, anything that we can do to stress that, you know, this doesn't stand alone as in isolation and for a, you know, a subset of the community, but there's ways that it connects to greater systems and will get, you know, greater use to a big parcel of land. I think maybe that could be helpful.
Yeah,
and Tom, I think that's an excellent point, because the rail trail goes right through there and right by there, and you know, the whole rail trail, the investment in the rail trail, I think, has been well received by the town. We have the bridge. There's going to be way more traffic bike traffic going by that property over the next few years when the Route 2 bridge is open.
That's exactly right. And so making it accessible and making it in fact safe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And easy for people to use is not unimportant. So anyway, just a heads up. And okay, and here's another one. You ready for another one? Now on the Bruce Freeman Rail, thank you, Linda. On the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, there were no questions. On the town of Concord Assabet River pedestrian bridge, the question became, why these costs? And I think we were able to address that thanks to the advice we've been given from Marcia, that this is seed money in comparison to how much this project is going to cost, which will be in fact borne by the state and by MassDOT, and that they will be the ones, spending the most amount of money. What I need from, I think, at this point from Marcia is a kind of sense for how much that particular project will cost that we will not bear. That this is seed money to get us in a queue to allow us therefore to garnish that money and produce this bridge. So thoughts about that?
Oh, I've heard $4 to $5 million.
Yeah, I have too. I've heard a lot
by the state.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too.
Yep.
And I guess that what really is great about it is that it's going to be pedestrian and bicycle. So it's going to be specifically designed that way.
Thank you, Charles. That's a good reminder of something to emphasize. And Charles, I just want to also that you reminded me of something, which is that not only that, but because ironically, this $300,000 and our little $4 to $5 million is considered by the state a small investment project. By making this bid now, we get in on the ground floor and maybe we'll get it. When other projects which are bigger and more comprehensive may not. So
right.
What's pretty I don't know if it's ironic or not, is that these projects are fulfilling a strategic plan, and there actually was never a strategic plan for connecting these pieces.
right.
The rail trail, the Giroux property, the open space, to Tom's earlier point, we're connecting into a system assets that shouldn't be viewed as standalone assets. They should be viewed as combined system recreational assets, et cetera. So we're kind of fulfilling that in an ad hoc basis.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. Thank you. Well, I'm trusting you all will be at the town meeting. We'll have a chance to review this again, but to stand up and support me. I think support us, obviously it's not a me.
Excuse me.
There was, of course, questions, as there always are, about the recreation and 75,000 and why that much money. And I think I was able to explain that what was so unique about this project was its connection with the community. And the fact that this was really going to be an outreach to neighborhoods and neighbors who are using these projects. So it's not just going to be an evaluation of the existing recreational facilities, but it's going to be an outreach to all those people who use it, and a way of embracing all of those as we cobble together a future sensibility for how these might be used. And so I think that diffused that one reasonably quickly, Paul.
Well, that's in a sense the future strategic plan to fill in the other pieces.
Right. So there you go. So just so you know, I went out there and took it for the team, and
well, Diane, well done. Sounds like you did a great job. Sorry I wasn't there, but that sounds like the committee was very, very active. They've been with complex matters before them in past years, been relatively passive. So nice job.
No, actually, they were good questions, and as I said, I think it comes from a certain kind of anxiety about the tax burden right now, and wishing to have an absolute accountability. Now, I did get one question off record from Dee Ortner, who, as you all know, was the chair of the CPC, and she did say, Diane, do you have any reserve left? And I said, my understanding is we will not, at the end of this year, have reserve left. Now, of course, not all that money is going to be spent instantaneously, and we may have some kind of flexibility as we go forward. Heather, can you address that for us a little bit?
Why, I'm sorry, why was she asking that question?
Well, because she feels that under her, when she was in charge of the CPC, when she was the chair, she felt it was always important to have some money in reserve.
Yeah,
So-
we won't have any money in reserve. You guys have allocated everything.
Well, what I'm going to quote, and what I did quote to her, was Stuart Saginaur's advice, was spend the money. You've got to spend it. Don't sit on it. And lots of places don't. And in fact, some places, go into bonding and borrow money in order to forward the project. So actually, we're being quite frugal, impressively frugal, and not recommend that strategy.
Diane, is there a larger question and undercurrent on tax dollars for CPA for CPC? Is it, or is that because basically the funding is there?
You're right. And, there doesn't seem to be, Paul. I just think that all public bodies and us, and I really respect this, all public bodies feel a responsibility to be as fiscally prudent as they can be. And I think with us, facing the middle school, responsibilities that are ahead, and facing, all sorts of other costs. I mean, broadband, the distribution of ARPA funds and how those are going to happen. I mean, there are a lot of big money issues in the discourse of our public leaders, and they feel, I think, a genuine responsibility, to demonstrate that they're doing this in a responsible way. Very interesting last night, Henry Dane said something I've not heard for a long time. And they were talking about the school committee, and FinCom has been a little bit anxious about, this is nothing to do with our committee, but CPS funding, because they're off. And what the school committee has essentially, not directly, I think, been arguing is that, look, we're way under, or not way under, we're under on our high school budget. So give us a break on our public school budget, on the K through 8 budget. And Henry said we should be supporting FinCom. Select board should be supporting FinCom. Now, whether that will prove true, whether that will carry, I don't know. But I can remember many a town meeting where I saw FinCom people throwing up their arms in despair because the concerns that they were registering were not carrying sufficient weight from their perspective. Now, as you know, they're only an advisory board. They don't have the right to say, this is what you must do, but they're an important advisory committee. And so this, I think that all of us are feeling, and we've felt, haven't we, Paul and Charles and Tom, we have felt a sense of responsibility to the thoughtful use of the funds that we have, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the money is there, and so we want to put taxpayer dollars to work and not bank it, as people have, contributed their hard-earned money for these things. At the same time, maybe to Dee's point, just because it's there doesn't mean we want to spend it if it's not they're not worthy causes. Better to reserve it than spend it on something that's not worthy. But I think we've been pretty disciplined about working very diligently through all of these processes and pretty deep and meaningful conversations. So I think the committee has done a great job under your leadership.
No, but but Tom, it's not under my, it's all of us. I mean, I think that the committee gets high praise, actually, for the due diligence that we exercise. So I mean, again and again, that doesn't mean that people aren't going to push and question. And I just want us to be
yeah, no,
yeah,
that's
aware
right.
of those questions.
Is there something in the application process in the future on the budget end of this where we can help the applicants to help us in justifying budgets? And is there adequate justification for this in the current application process, or could we ask for more? I'm not sure.
No, Paul, that's a really good question. We might emphasize, I mean, there's the line that says other contributions or other resources to support something, but we might kind of beef that up a little bit and ask for both historically and present resources that have supported this project, whatever it may be. So that, for instance, something like the 110, and I received quite a lengthy, incidentally, memo from Anita Techley of ways to support what they're doing. And so that's very helpful, but because I didn't get as much pushback on that one as I have on others, but the 110 Walden Street Preservation Project. So she sent me some data that we can use in that that I can use succinctly and carefully in that presentation. I think that anything we can do to emphasize that syllable, in the application, it would be helpful. Heather, what do you think? Is there a way we can do this smartly?
Yeah, I think we can look at that.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head. I would need to like pull up the application and see how it's worded now.
Okay. Well, let's think about doing that. And incidentally, since we now know that Heather has resigned and is having a second child, congratulations, Heather.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just have to tell you, I've been in mourning. I've been walking around now saying, no. And you should know, we're going to have a dinner for you. So I'm already planning how to do this.
Thanks.
I want you to know that I was in unsolicited. Thank you very much. I was at a gathering on Saturday, and people were talking about various things in the town. And somebody said, "Yeah, but the best person in the whole town is Heather Gill." And I said,
she's well, that's very nice.
Your good reputation is broad and rich.
That's great to hear.
It's replacing your institutional memory as young as you are. You have tremendous institutional memory about these projects. This can be tough.
Yeah. Heather, can you, while we're on this topic, could you just remind us about your timetable?
So my last full day with the town is May 2nd. And then Marsh and Elizabeth are trying to work with HR to hire me as a consultant May, and then maybe like part of June. And I'll work part-time for the town to hopefully transition who's ever going to take my spot. I don't think they've advertised for my job yet. So I don't know when that's going to get started, but hopefully I'll be able to help train who's ever going to take over so that they're not just walking into an office and trying to figure it all out like I had to 5 years ago.
Right. So town meeting May 1st?
Yes. So the day after is my last
May
full
2nd
day.
Wow.
We've got to get CPC passed.
Exactly. You must prevail.
Yeah.
We can appeal the town meeting and say, there's no way you can't pass this because Heather's leaving.
Well,
I don't want to hear a word of dissent.
Well, hopefully I'll be part-time like right after to
through the
start
month
getting
of
grant
May.
agreements out and that sort of thing.
Well, how about just staying part-time for the next couple of years just with our committee? How does that?
Well,
I don't know how I would be part-time with 2 kids at home under 2.
In my very short tenure on CPC, I've come to realize how valuable you are and how helpful it's been amazing. You've helped me. You've helped me learn a lot. Only second to Diane, who's taught me everything. So.
Yeah.
Heather, and Heather, what is your due date, hon? I forgot to ask that.
July 4th is my due date.
Oh, I can't.
Fireworks.
Oh, fantastic. So Charlotte's going to have a baby sister, I gather, right?
A sister, yep.
Oh boy, I wanted a sister so much. You're so lucky.
I grew up with 2 sisters, so I'm excited to have girls.
Oh, are you lucky?
It's great.
Paul.
That's great.
Diane, on a business note,
Yep.
sometime in the next, after town meeting, in one of our meetings, I'd like to discuss some potential improvements in the application process. We talked about one tonight. There may be other, and we talked about community involvement and notification and talked about connectivity between projects. There may be ways to
Evaluate
improve
that.
right a little bit. So if we can reserve a little time sometime in the next few months on that, it'd be great.
Oh, that's a terrific idea. And at our next meeting, we have to kind of nail down the MOUs.
Right.
And which I'm using a shorthand. I don't even think that's probably exactly the right language, but our memorandum of understanding about each of these projects, and to make sure that those are communicated with the application, with the people who have applied before the May 1st town meeting. So I think we're getting there. Tom, have we always for the town meeting, or have we been able to do it a little bit? We've been able to sneak it in a little bit later.
Yeah, we can approve the grant agreements and MOUs after town meeting.
Oh, good. Okay.
So Heather, I don't really want to shift the focus away from you because it's most important, but you're the one that really knows this information. So May 1st would be the end of my term.
Yes, I believe so.
Right. So I think, are there several of us? So that's also something.
It's actually May 31st.
Oh, it is May 31st. Oh, okay.
Yes, so you're stuck through the end of the month.
No, that's fine. I just wasn't sure. Okay, thank you.
Tom,
Yeah, so
you can reapply.
Tom, you are the only one that's expiring this year.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you.
You're not really expiring.
I was going to say that's horrible.
I mean, I'm gonna hang on the best I can.
Position is expiring.
No, I mean, I'm a little tired, but otherwise I feel.
So, Tom, can you tell us what medications are you taking? We'll work. Oh man, but Tom, please reapply.
Well, no, thank you. No, I just wasn't sure if it was that day. Yeah, so okay, thank you so much.
Okay, so Linda Escobedo, do you have any comments to make about the raucous behavior of our little?
It's all very appropriate all the way around. And Tom, I can make sure with the committee's approval that you're on the select board agenda for reappointment.
Hey, all right, Linda, we'll find a time to talk. Thank you.
Yeah, oh, it sounds like Tom's equivocating. Oh, Tom, if you don't want to equivocate, I'm living in an equivocal world right now. Okay. Thank you all. I think we will adjourn because we can't really vote the minutes.
Well,
right.
I don't know if anyone had a chance to review the draft project conditions at all and the updates that I made from our last meeting.
I didn't, because that's my fault, because we were on the move and I was teaching, so I missed.
Yeah.
Were they
a
bunch of comments? A bunch of comments in green? Were they?
Yeah. So anything in green was what I added
I saw that, yeah.
from the last version, and then anything in red was something that I removed from the last version.
Okay, I did see that.
I think it would be helpful to send the draft conditions to the applicants to just receive their comments and feedback so that we have those for our next meeting.
Right.
I don't, I can say this is not a final version of draft conditions, but this is our working draft and we'd like any comments at this point in time. I think that would be helpful, because if anything comes back that's like a major red flag for them, we need to be able to have a discussion about that at our next meeting. And putting that off puts off grant agreements and MOUs because they have to be incorporated in. So
can you send around a note to everybody on the committee saying, de rigueur, you must go and review these, and you need us to review them by next Monday and get back to you? Because I don't think we can do it right now.
No. Well, the committee can't send me comments to revise a draft outside of a meeting because of open meeting law. But just if I could send them to the applicants, just so for our next meeting in April, we have their comments on the draft conditions as currently drafted.
Who is there?
All of the applicants. So Marcia's comments on her projects, Right Tavern's comments on their draft conditions, 110 Walden's comments on their draft conditions.
Okay. Tom.
So for my own clarification, so a couple of the maybe rather modest comments that I had for the Right Tavern PR, did those, and so do I need to reinforce those, or did you capture those and they will be conveyed?
That you made last time?
At this meeting, at the
At
beginning of
this
this meeting?
meeting.
I just don't know in terms of homework. Do I need to potentially convey that, what I was trying to articulate, or do you think I did that? Sorry,
If you
know what I mean?
think that it needs to be incorporated as one of the conditions of the project.
I thought, may I just explore this a little bit so I can be really clear about it? I thought that what I was trying to get from Nadia, and I think I may have, is that I was asking about the linkage between the commencement of work and the approved PR. And I was sad that Nancy wasn't here because she is laser focused on these kinds of issues. So I was trying to channel her a little bit, but that I think the agreement, and Tom reinforced this, generally is that we would get an approved and executed PR, and work would commence after that period of time. And I thought Nadia, the attorney, said that wouldn't be appropriate to be in the PR, it would be in another document. And then for me, that meant it will show up in the conditions.
I think it is in the condition. I looked at
Is it?
item 3 in the conditions. It looks like it's in there.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
It says the plan should be submitted to the CPC. It doesn't refer to the PR though.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so
Was
yeah,
just
so we have like the time requirement on the PR needs to be done before town meeting, and then they need to submit their final plans to CPC prior to commencing work is in the.
and the point I was making, and I it's probably not fair to say, but I was trying to channel my best Nancy in this way, because she's so good.
Yeah.
No, she's so really good with this. I was thinking in my mind, if the PR does not get executed for quite a period of time, and it's possible because it's got to go to Mass Historic and whatever, then we don't really have those guidelines for us. And then they start to do things to the building. The actual, Secretary of the Interiors and all the guidelines are not really in place. And so I was just trying to figure out if there was some.
So I can add to one of the conditions that the PR needs to be in place with the Massachusetts Historical Commission and recorded at the registry prior to the commencement of work.
Because Nancy's already being asked to sign certain agreements for work being started. Now, I think it's mostly architectural work and work by Lynn and others, Nadia, Lynn, those people who are doing work.
Yeah.
And she's kind of wondering, do I sign this? Do I not? As the treasurer, what do I sign off on and what do I not sign off on? Has there been any physical work, Heather, that she's been asked, on which she's been asked to add a signature?
So they did submit a reimbursement request and I pushed back on it, on the two things they submitted a request for, stating that I didn't think they qualified for a reimbursement. One was for legal expenses for the preservation restriction, which it was specifically stated in the grant agreement that the legal expenses were at the cost of the applicant.
Right.
So that's not fundable. And then I pushed back on, they submitted was invoices from an architect. And I said, I need to know what that architect was doing. Are they a consultant on the project? Were they developing plans? Because I need to make sure it is one of the specific points that was fundable. And so I've asked them to submit a detailed invoice for that, and they have not submitted that yet. So I've not drafted anything for Nancy to sign, because as of right now, I've told them it's not fundable.
Okay.
As they've submitted their request.
Okay, well, I knew that she asked me about whether she could sign certain things, but I wasn't, but we couldn't connect today, so I didn't get a chance to figure it out. And I want to apologize for the fact that my iPad seems to have popped up here. I was trying to figure out where the document was that you're talking about, and somehow that happened. So my apologies. Linda Escobedo. Hello.
Thank you. Regarding your discussion on the conditions for this specific one, and forgive me if I missed this earlier, but I'm assuming that town council will also need to look at the preservation restriction. And for example, I did notice that in terms of some details that it mentioned Middlesex County Registry of Deeds, not the Southern District, which is where some of the other deeds are listed. And there were a couple other points that specifically called out the relationship with the town. I think Tom mentioned one of these earlier when he said that HDC also needed to be involved, especially with signage and some other aspects. But there were a couple other points I remember viewing or noticing when I looked at this a couple days ago, that had to do with the assignment and the extinguishment clauses, that I thought it was important for our make sure our town council has seen this. So we've got to factor that in, the deadline, and also the sort of the process of when certain groups are signing the document after that occurs. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. I hope we have some time on that, Heather, right? We don't have to have that done by town meeting.
Right. So the condition for this year's funding was that that the Historical Commission and CPC has reviewed and approved the PR so that it's ready to be submitted. The condition as a requirement of their PR for their funding last year, and the condition last year for the PR does specifically list that, you know, town council needs to review it before it gets sent to the Massachusetts Historical Commission, who needs to approve it, and then it gets recorded at the registry. So this year's condition references that condition, and it just gives a timeline on CPC and Historical Commission signing off on it prior to town meeting. But it does reference last year's condition that specifically calls out town council needing to review it.
You know, given their capacity, and I mean this in no discourteous way, but given their capacity to not notice that kind of thing, would probably be advantageous to remind them of the necessity of town council signing off on that. Heather, could you scoot them a note and remind them of that? You have time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they're aware of that process.
Okay,
It just won't happen prior to town meeting.
well, just in case, it's probably a good tickler.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom?
So thank you. So following up on Linda's comment, that my earlier comment to Nadia is with regard to Exhibit E, restriction guidelines. And there, I thought there could be some reference made to HDC and, you know, possibly CHC as well. But certainly, I mean, they're saying there's minors and majors. Minors, we don't have to take to the town. Majors, we do have to take to the town, but it's, you know, it's kind of general.
Yeah, the town
I think that they need to follow, you know, HDC guidelines for what needs to come before them.
There is also a condition in the draft conditions for the grant agreement is that specifically for HDC.
Super, thank you.
And they're meeting with HDC twice in the next.
They're meeting with the Historical Commission.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you.
I'm sure that they're not even going to be proposing any work that would require HDC approval.
Right.
But if they are, there is a condition in the grant agreement that would require them to receive HDC approval.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate it.
So Heather, I'm sure you can have two children, 2 and under, and still be our I just want you to keep thinking about that. We're going to be passing a buck and passing a buck as we speak. You are so divine. Okay, is there anything else? Okay, thank you all so much. And John, who's not here, just for the record, thank you for checking in from Spain. Just astonishing. I'm on another committee, and Paul, of course, you did it from Hawaii. I'm on another committee, and you know, where there's a a whole crowd of people all over the world right now, communicating. Zoom is an amazing thing. Thank you, Heather. And thank you, Tom and Paul and Charles very much. And Linda, thank you. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Second, do we all say aye? Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.